Hey, back at you guys, 2014, TEA MAGE TV here. I got Tom Woods, just rocked the house. Welcome to Minnesota, back at it. 2 cancellations of his flights. Then he drove himself from Kansas City, so.
Yeah, I flight was canceled, so I decided that if I'm going to make it, I'm going to have to drive, which was like 7 hours. But, you know, I committed to be here, and if it's physically possible for me to do it and not leave people in the lurch, I am going to be here. So I drove.
Well, thanks for coming. I really appreciate it. Probably most of the same audience that saw the last interview will be seeing this, hopefully a few more people. And anyways, I asked a few people that couldn't make it tonight some questions maybe to ask you. I had a couple questions of my own. And I know, just to kick it off, you do a lot of stuff for Ron Paul, and he does a lot of homeschooling. He's got his own homeschooling curriculum.
Yep.
And so a lot of the questions of the people that I know have to do with the free market solution to education. So besides going to Washington, D.C. and finding the power cord and unplugging the Department of Education, and maybe besides doing a straight homeschool curriculum, how do we get an actual free market in education established better? How do we fight the system of government education without sending our kids to the government schools or without doing a homeschool? I mean, is there a middle ground, I guess is what I'm trying to say, without being too complicated
Well,
here?
yeah, I mean, it's not easy because, of course, you have to pay twice. You have to pay the tuition to whatever your solution is, and you have to pay your local property taxes. So I just favor trying to oppose every single increase in those taxes to try to make it as easy on a family that wants an alternative as possible. Homeschooling is an option for some people,
Absolutely.
but you know what? We shouldn't make light of how difficult it is. It's not an easy thing to do
True.
homeschooling. I mean, some people think it is. For some people, it comes very easily. Other people, it's more difficult. But I think most people who stick with it for a while realize that there is something important going on here. That my kids really do matter, and it's important for me that they get the best experience they have with education, but also that they get exposed to ideas they're not going to get exposed to otherwise. Not that they get only our ideas, but our ideas don't get really any traction in the government schools. And I think instead of trying to get on the school board and try to get 1 out of 18 textbooks changed to a 5% less offensive textbook, instead just try to come up with the best kind of personal solution you can. And it's interesting, I had on my podcast earlier this year, I had a woman, Professor Dixon from the UK, who did an incredible study of these extremely low-cost private schools in the third world, all over the world. And she said the experts didn't even know these schools existed. But when you get in there on the ground, you see that they're more effective, the parents are happier with them, they're more responsive to the parents, they're dirt cheap, the figures on how well the students are doing much better in these schools, and these things aren't supposed to exist. I mean, supposedly the government has to run it,
Yes.
or otherwise everybody will be stupid. But yet, who are you going to believe? That theory or your own eyes? So if there is such incredible possibilities for education, especially today when it can be delivered so inexpensively. I think we're going to see some shackles coming off and some handcuffs coming off because
I hope so.
with the low-cost possibilities that the internet makes possible today,
Yes.
I don't see how this system just carries on as if nothing has changed.
I've had this conversation more or less before with some people I know that are both in the education field and out of it, and maybe 5 years ago I was talking to some friends that are on the same maybe free market mindset, and we were talking about all the strip malls that are empty and all the people we knew that were just graduating college with teaching degrees, and we said, how do you turn the system where you need the piece of paper, you need the government certificate, you need all this to teach? And I said, how many people would we know where we could probably hire competent people our age as entrepreneurs, start some kind of school in a strip mall, and with no regulations, lay down a couple grand bet and say in 5 years we're going to have our kids do a standardized test versus the other kids in the public.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
You know what I mean? And
I
this
know.
was us sitting around having a couple beers talking about how to break into this free market education system that doesn't exist yet. And so it's so refreshing to hear you way more eloquently than I could possibly do break it down. But is that the right way to think?
Yeah,
I mean,
it's definitely the right way to think. I mean, something unusual that hasn't been tried, but yet that sounds very plausible, likely to be effective. And you look for jurisdictions where, it's not as totalitarian, where you can find a niche for what it is that you're doing. And then you lead by example. And then maybe you do well enough that it forces other places to slightly ease some of the regulations on alternatives to traditional schooling.
Very cool, very cool. Well, I'll transition as quickly as I can because there's no smooth way to do this, but we're talking about government intervention in the marketplace. And some of the people that are really the experts, some of the guys, Dave Benner, Jake Duesenberg, the guys from the Tea Party here, East Metro Tea Party, they talk about some interesting things that I've never studied, like in the 19th century, how the things that could impeach a president were so much more trivial to today's minds. And so they're saying the things that could impeach a president so easily 100, 150 years ago, today we just let the president or anybody do what they want to do. So I guess my question for you, the scholar, is have you spent a lot of your, when you're laying at night on the pillow and you're thinking about all the troubles in the world, worrying about what we could impeach, let's say Barack Obama? I mean, I'm sure you could come up with a million things that would be semi-legitimate or very legitimate reasons to impeach the president right now. Maybe I'm wrong, but is it worth the process is my question, because it seems like it's so far out now compared to 100 years ago, even 200 years ago, when it was a lot easier to come up with reasons to do so.
Well, I would say that the only one good thing about it would be the process, because the actual bringing of articles of impeachment, and then then you have to have it turns into a big media circus and everything. That's great, because if for the same reason that people said that the impeachment of Clinton was a big waste of time, why was it a waste of time? Because it meant that they couldn't spend their time conspiring against us, which is what they normally spend their time doing. Instead, they had to spend their time talking about Bill Clinton and going through the impeachment proceedings and all that. So if it slows them down, then I favor it. Yeah, I think we could probably come up with reasons for all of them to be impeached. I mean, I think Libya could potentially be impeachable. I mean, there are all kinds of things that you could think of that could be impeachable.
Is it worth your time, Tom Wood's time, to spend some time convincing people that's the right path? No. So it's not. Okay.
Well, not for me, but because it's not an area that I feel like I have a particular advantage in. That I would be especially persuasive there.
Okay.
I should focus in areas that I'm better at. But I'm sure we've got some people who could make a good argument.
Okay. So don't give up on that avenue if that's what you're about.
Yeah, but on the other hand, the
expertise.
concern about impeachment is that it feeds into this idea that our problem is this particular president.
Right.
The problem really is, first of all, the whole office of the presidency, but the problem is the whole institution. And as long as we keep emphasizing that, look, it's not just this man, it's the things he did, no matter who it was who did them, that we're opposed to.
So don't hate the player, hate the game, says Tom Woods. Basically, right?
All right. There you go.
So this is similar transition down the path of impeachment here. Let's just get real quick, and I'll try to sum this up and get out of here. But voting itself, is that? I was just telling Tom a little bit backstage. A lot of the concerns that people that start getting really into the liberty philosophy, the philosophy of liberty, the libertarian mindset, classical liberals, whatever it is. I voted X number of times. I voted 10 times, nothing changed, so I'm going to vote extra hard the 11th time. So where in your philosophy does the process of voting lie, I guess, and try to justify or say no to this idea? Because once again, it's a system that we're supposed to believe in, correct?
Right. Okay, now here I get into some trouble with some people, because I think I don't say it's imperative, like it's your duty to vote or anything like that. If you don't want to vote, don't vote. But I don't think it's a moral problem to vote. Like Lysander Spooner did not think it was a moral problem to vote, and he was pretty hardcore.
Sure.
I mean, I would say it would be like, for instance, people will say if you vote, you're consenting to the system.
Yes.
But I don't think that's true, because
really?
If I were in a concentration camp and they said, all right, everybody, we're going to have a vote on whether you think you should be freed or not, if I just stood there and said, on principle, I won't vote in your election, I'd be an idiot.
Right.
By voting, I wouldn't be consenting to the system. I would be saying, I'd be acting according to my own self-interest, saying, in this situation, I think this might make me better off. Now, most of the time, though, there just aren't, I wanted to defend the idea of voting because I wanted people to vote for Ron Paul. Now, there aren't very many Ron Pauls. There's like one guy.
Yeah.
So at this point, the idea about voting becomes almost a theoretical argument about whether or not to vote. But I think it's okay. I don't think I'm consenting. The left is the ones who think that if you can't complain because you voted, so now everything this person does, you have to take. Why? What? Why? Why should I? Just because I did one thing, I've authorized everything? What other aspect of life do you say, well, because you raised one eyebrow, therefore the following 10 things that I do, you can't be opposed to? No. So, I do think, though, on the local level, now on the federal level, it's probably hopeless. You vote for some congressman, nothing ever happens.
Right.
But on the local level, you can sometimes change some things. Like you can defeat a raising taxes measure.
Yeah.
Like, you should vote against raising taxes. If there's some popular referendum, like, why would you not want to vote for that? Like, they're saying, should we loot you more or less? I want to be looted less.
Is there a tipping point, though? Say you got 5 candidates running, and you got the 90%, the 91%, the 92%, 93% tax guys.
Yeah, okay, well, at that point, yeah, that's right. At that point, I would say, at that point, I would say it's not worth. It would be like distinguishing between Hitler and Stalin.
So there's a tipping point. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't know exactly what the figure is. At some point, I would say this is just stupid.
Well, that's why I'm gracious to have you. This middle ground, this gray area. This is where I think the ideas come to test. Right? It's a stress test of the ideal.
Let me put it this way.
Sure.
I have a friend who runs the Libertas Institute in Utah, and it's a public policy sort of thing.
Okay.
And he is hated by all the so-called conservative public policy institutes because their view is public policy institutes exist to earn salaries for the people who work there and to make a lot of noise and then do nothing.
Okay.
Whereas he has actually helped to pass bill after bill after bill that has actually peeled away some of the worst abuses and has advanced liberty. So sometimes I get into these moods where I say, voting is all a big scam, it's all a waste of time. But then when I see somebody like him and he's made tangible changes at the local level, I say, well, this is not something I can be totally dogmatic about.
I really like that. I'm going to try to wrap this up here. Before we get out of here, what can you say about the works that you're working on right now? Whether it's your book or not, but where's your mental state at? Because you've probably been asked this the last 6 months. What's the next book? 5 people. Tom.
Yeah. I haven't written a book in several years now.
Okay.
And I've been really happy. They've been like several of the happiest years of my life because it gets hard after a while.
I know what you mean.
Not writing
Sometimes
the books,
you got to take a deeper breath.
But you got to
be
when you write a book, you got to be a salesman all the time. Like a lot of people say when they see Peter Schiff on TV, they say all he does is hawk his book. But you have to do that when you're on TV because every year almost 200,000 distinct books are released. You're competing against 199,999 other books. If you don't constantly hammer home that you have this book, you're never going to sell any. I get sick and tired of, because then the publisher tells you when you're on the radio, you always have to say, well, as I say in my book, such and such. I mean, so at least one good thing is my last 3 books each had one-word titles, so it was easy to say, well, in my book Meltdown, blah blah blah. But try saying that with 33 questions about American. I mean, like
good point.
Yeah.
Good point.
But I am going to release because I've been doing other things. I have libertyclassroom.com, and I have a weekday podcast at tomwoodsradio.com that I like, and I'm doing courses for ronpaulhomeschool.com. It's taken all my time, and these things are at least as important as any book. Well, however, I am going to do a book this year, but mainly to give away to people who are supporting my show and stuff. I mean, I'll sell it on Amazon, but I'm going to give it to them for free. And it's basically going to take a lot of people like when I smack down a bad guy.
Yep.
They say, "Oh, it's another Woods smackdown," and that makes me feel good. Like I'm useful in this world.
Yep.
Well, but those are all floating around somewhere out in the internet. I'm going to take a lot of these together, make a whole book out of them, just one after the other, just bang, bang, bang.
So it'll be an all-encompassing book of as many angles as you can come
on
up,
all different sorts of topics,
Okay.
but it'll be mostly, but not exclusively, me going after sometimes really vicious critics of libertarianism and stuff, like in Salon and Slate.
Oh, I'm buying that,
Yeah,
man.
yeah. So
No,
so it's without a title, and
you've never said anything bad about like the New York Times or Krugman or
No,
those guys,
never,
right?
never.
Right?
So I'm gonna have to scrounge.
You're gonna have to put those in the book.
That's right.
You're gonna have to dig deep.
Well, so on I have a newsletter at my website.
Mm-hmm.
It's tomwoods.com, tomwoodsradio.com. I have a newsletter. It comes out once a week, and if you hate it, you can throw it away. Virtually throw it away. But just last week, I put in there that I'm going to do this book, and I have no idea what the title should be. And if you can come up with a title, I'll give you a lifetime subscription to libertyclassroom.com. But some people keep suggesting you had Meltdown. Why don't you call this one Smackdown?
Smackdown.
But then I'll get all the delicate flowers out there.
I
who
think
will say,
still not melted yet.
Yeah, well, no, wait. I want to explain why I'm not doing SmackDown. There'll be all these delicate flowers in the libertarian world who say, "Oh, but you shouldn't talk that way. We're trying to persuade people." Like these people, they just never have any fun. I do try to persuade people, but
gotta mix up
sometimes
your
bad
style.
guys. You're right. Bad guys need to be smashed.
If you're not
Good
a
guys
Pink
need to be
Floyd
argued
fan,
with.
Pink Floyd mixed up their style, and that's why they're better than the Beatles.
Well, like each album is different. Right? Animals does not sound like The Wall at all.
Right. Animals is one song.
Or like the final cut does not sound like Dark Side of the Moon. That's
right.
That's why I like. Whereas I don't want to offend anybody here, but You got one AC/DC album, you got them all, as far as I'm concerned.
It's the best
all you
interview
need is
I've ever
Back
done.
in Black. That's all you
Yes.
need.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. Well, thanks again to Tom Woods for coming on TEA MAGE TV. It's a pleasure to have him back. Glad you made it safe. It's a torrent out there. My basement almost flooded. And then also, he mentioned his podcast, but from behalf of TEA MAGE TV, that's one of the biggest influences day to day for me getting information, getting perspectives on things that are going on. So Tom Woods, it's available. The app I use is called Beyond Pod, just to plug that or whatever. But you can find Tom, just type Tom Woods podcast. Any podcast server or whatever host can get his podcast, and they're awesome. When you're gardening after work, you're having your beer. That's what I do. Picking the weeds with one hand, Bluetooth in. It's serious.
Good man.
That's what I do.
I'm always interested in how people listen.
That's how I get my Tom Woods about 5:30 to 6:30 every day. I'm gardening, listening to Tom Woods having a beer. It's the best. So
That's nice.
hey, glad to
great
have you
seeing
back.
you,
This
man.
is great.
My
Absolutely. TEA MAGE TV. Peace out.